So this is from the book, The Rough Guide to Jazz, 100 Essential CDs. And this one's Duke Ellington's The Blanton Webster Band. And this is a 3 CD set of 66 tunes. And they're not just soloists with backing rhythm, but a well-arranged big band with lots going on, even behind the soloists. So each track deserves more careful listening than, say, a quartet. Also, the names of the tunes are jumbled up on the CDs. I listened to them on YouTube, and whilst I managed to correct some of them because I know them, and some because they are songs and the lyrics gave the title, there are a lot that I didn't know and could be called anything, and they possibly were on the CDs. So this is the list of participants. Ellington on piano, Wallace Jones, Cooter Williams on trumpet, Rex Stewart on cornet, Tricky Sam Nanton, Lawrence Brown on trombone, Juan Tizzle on valve trombone, Barnaby Gard, Johnny Hodges, Otto Hardwick, Ben Webster, Art Carney on reeds, Billy Strayhorn also on piano, Fred Guy on guitar, Jimmy Blanton on bass, Sonny Greer on drums, and Ivy Anderson and Herb Jeffries singing. And whoever gave this list of musicians obviously thought that the reed players could play any reed instrument, whereas they specialise as much as the brass people do. And to say valve trombone or cornet, some of them specialise, the reed players specialise in clarinet or baritone saxophone. That's just a little aside from me as a reed player. So the text of this thing says, like Louis Armstrong, his principal contender for artistic supremacy in 20th century American jazz, Duke Ellington's musical development is fulsomely represented in discographical terms. Amid the cornucopia, there are regular zeniths as well as the odd nadir, spread over 5 decades. But many of his most devoted and informed admirers regularly cite the music of the Blanton Webster Band as Ellington's finest on record. The dual presence of Blanton and Webster is a benchmark rather than a raison d'etre for the music's excellence. Ben Webster was already a premier tenor saxophone soloist by the time he rejoined Ellington's band in January 1940. The phenomenal double bassist Jimmy Blanton, who had arrived a few months previously and who left the band in 1941 prior to his death from tuberculosis at only 23, is acknowledged by later masters such as Ray Brown as the father of contemporary methodology for his instrument. Both men were willingly lending their talents to Ellington at a crucial creative high point in his own career. An artistic partnership with Billy Strayhorn, and I've got another little note here of my own. It says, Duke Ellington was a workaholic. He wrote music all the time, as well as run a big band and gave interviews, but he hid behind a persona of laid-back, sophisticated demeanour. Billy Strayhorn was that persona come to life, and I suspect that's why Duke Ellington was fond of him. Billy Strayhorn came from the poorest of poor families, but became a pianist of classical ability and a composer. Duke Ellington was more of an arranger for his band, but Billy Strayhorn was a composer. So that's my little aside. An artistic partnership with Billy Strayhorn was beginning after after 14 years in which Ellington's orchestra had moved on from jungle music through a 1930s decade of technical and artistic expansion, including his extended compositions beginning with Creole Rhapsody in 1931. By 1940, it seems as if Duke, his Nuum Amanuensis and his orchestra were all standing like pipers at the gates of a great creative dawn. By 1940, virtually every player in Ellington's orchestra was a major voice bound for jazz immortality, and the same thing could be said for many of the 66 recordings fashioned by Ellington and Strayhorn in the 29 months between March 1940 and July 1942. Within 1 year of a succession of masterpieces conceived by the leader alone, Coco, Morning Glory, Concerto for Cootie, Bojangles, Sepia Panorama, and more, had flooded from the instrument which was his orchestra. It didn't seem to matter that in 1941 an ASCAP band temporarily barred much previously written popular music from the radio waves. Ellington shored up by a significant writing support from Strayhorn, as well as some Mercer and valve trombonist Juan Tizzle, continued to ride his wave. It was only the full-time ban of recording by James C. Petrillo's American Federation of Musicians that finally stopped the story until December 1944. If Ellington had never recorded again, however, his immortality would be assured with the music here. Track by track, it offers supreme demonstrations of his compositional genius, of the total originality with which he used the instrumental possibilities of a dance orchestra, and of course the uncanny creative unity cemented between Ellington and Strayhorn. In later years it was frequently impossible to be sure who had composed what. Classic examples here include Strayhorn's own Take the A Train, Ellington's signature tune from 1941, Rain Check, and the almost spectral Chelsea Bridge. Ellington's myriad classics including three random examples: the tone poem Harlem Air Shaft, echoingly impressionistic Sepia Panorama, and stunningly menacing Coco, were instantly to take their place among his most revered work, and even less profound diversions, At a Dixie Roadside Diner, Hayfoot Strawfoot, and The Slip of the Lip Can Sink a Ship, are still irresistible. Classic solos also abound. Nance on Take the A Chain, Webster's Roughhouse tenor on Cottontail, and I've got a little aside again for this. Lambert's, Hendricks and Ross have a wonderful vocalese version of Cottontail, which is very funny and takes nothing away from the Ben Webster brilliance. So, Take the A Train, Webster's Roadhouse tenor on Cottontail, and Blanton's nimble bass on Coco. Blanton's nimble bass on Coco. And that's the end of it.